Joining us now in the studio, Matt Bevington from King's College here in London, who's also an author for the Changing in a UK Europe research group. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. Also, as you've been hearing, cross-party talks have failed. The two main parties haven't been able to reach a consensus on dealing with what has become a deepening crisis in the country. What does it mean for those established parties when it comes to the European elections next week?
Well, I'm not sure if they'd have come to a deal, it would really have affected their vote share too much. I mean, this is really an election all about Brexit and the two sides of the Brexit argument, sort of reheating the old arguments in some ways. I think what's happening is the two main parties are basically being seen as a political establishment in themselves, and voters are looking to other parties, smaller parties, and obviously the new Brexit party to express their dissatisfaction with those two main parties, which they sort of see as being the same thing in lots of ways.
And that's the thing, is that since the 2016 referendum, we see this deepening polarisation, which means that the parties at two extreme ends of the debate are the ones that are winning. But how much of a problem is it that the anti-Brexit entity, which isn't really an entity, the parties, the Liberal Democrats, the Greens and the new Change UK party, they are not standing as a single entity, so that will presumably split that vote.
Yeah, it looks like it will do. I mean, the Lib Dems are actually doing really well relative to what they were doing a couple of months ago. They had a really good local election result, and they've sort of become the main Remain party as it stands at the minute. But as you say, they're still split. The Greens look like they're going to get about 10% of the vote, and then Change UK something much less than that. But ultimately, I think for Change UK and for the other Remain-leaning parties, what they'll try and do is, as we just heard, tot up their votes and say, look, this is what the situation is on Brexit overall. It doesn't really matter that the Brexit party is winning all the seats, because what matters is public opinion across the country as a whole. And actually, it will probably be much more divided than the result of the European elections suggests.
How has the sentiment in the country changed in the last 6 to 8 months? Obviously, there has been a great deal of chaos in Westminster. Does it look as though Labour and the Conservatives will just lose votes to the smaller parties, or are there many people that will simply not bother turning out to vote? Has it generated a fair bit of apathy?
I'm sure that is the case, actually. I think the real uncertainty in this election is turnout. Who is the more motivated side of the argument? Is it the Brexit party side of the argument who feel let down that we didn't leave the EU when the Prime Minister said we would? Or is it the Remain side who are still hoping that they can overturn the whole thing? We just don't know at the minute, and that will be the really interesting thing with the results of this election, which side is actually motivating its voters more.
Thanks very much. Appreciate your insight into this. Matt Bevington joining us there from the UK in A Changing Europe.